Started. Welcome to this afternoon's quick response webinar focused on strategies for approaching the use of federal funds to sustain a mixed delivery system. We're very excited today to be able to learn from a couple different states about the examples that they've had over the last couple months and how they've approached some of these strategic partnerships as they think about the work that we're doing through PDG. So thank you all for joining and for being here. As we get started, there's a couple things, just housekeeping, that we'd like to keep you aware of. One is that it'd be great to change your Zoom name. We will be going into breakout rooms a little bit later in the webinar this afternoon, and so it's going to be really important that we know exactly where you are from so we can put you with your right team members. So please take a minute to follow the instructions on the screen and to rename yourself in Zoom. I'm sure you are all experts at this point to do so, but please put your name and then the state that you are with. Take a second to let you do that. As you are getting started and as you're doing that, also, just as a quick reminder that we're expecting a lot of folks on this call, so please do keep yourself on mute. And if you need to switch to audio, here are some instructions to help you do so as well. Again, at this point, I'm sure we are all Zoom experts, but just in case you wanted to change your audio, if you called it on your phone, make sure it's associated with your name so that when we go into the breakout rooms, your phone and your face go together. Okay. We are really excited. Thank you for joining this afternoon. My name is Missy Coffey, and I'm the Center Director for the National Center for the Fiscal Development Grant. And so I am joined today by Paula Bendel-Smith and Richard Gonzalez, and I'm going to let them say their welcomes.
Hi, everybody. This is Rich Gonzalez, just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here. Wanted to let you know right off the bat that there might have been some confusion about what this presentation is going to be. So first of all, it is not guidance for the new money that is coming out. In fact, by the way, just before we came on here, I got an email that said that the ARP Act stabilization guidance is now available and will become available to you. So you'll see it soon. This presentation is really about past experiences, past strategies, past efforts underway by states that help them to think about how to sustain their initiatives and build stronger partnerships and work toward an effective mixed delivery system. So if you join this, you see the disclaimer on the screen. If you join this webinar thinking this is particular guidance on how to spend the new money, it is not that. So as long as you know that and you come into this presentation listening to what's really going to be a lot of good information about history and past practices and efforts, I think you will find that the information here is useful to you. And then once you see the guidance that comes out and that is about to become available on the new funds, you can take what you've heard in this presentation, you can think about it, you can look at the specific guidance related to the new money, and you can see how the two might mesh together. So I think this is an exciting time for all of us. It's also overwhelming time as there's so many opportunities here. And so I just want to thank the PDG B-5 TA Center and all of the states who are speaking and all of the people who helped put this together. I've been out of the loop for a while, so I'm actually just as interested in hearing what's going to happen in this presentation as many of you are. So thank you. And Paula, I don't know if you want to add anything or reinforce anything that I've just said before we get underway.
Thank you, Richard. I think you've said it all, and I want to, on behalf of all of us, I also want to thank you for the reason that you've been out of touch for a little while. And that was the work that you were doing with unaccompanied minors who have come across the border recently. So thank you for that and welcome back.
Thanks, guys. So
all right.
It's back to you now.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks, Paula, for your support on this very quick turnaround response webinar. So we are excited to get started. So now that we know what this webinar is not, let's talk a little bit about what it is. So as Richard mentioned, this focus is really on learning about the past and existing federal funding opportunities that really can bring together the different types of supports, right? So this is not the first time that one-time dollars have been put out. Many of you have lived through RTTLC or the ARA dollars. And today we're going to learn a little bit more about how you can use it as an opportunity to really sustain some of the work that you're trying to do under PDG. And to also, I think, hear from your peers. And so this is what many of you have been asking for, which is how do we hear from other people about how they're approaching these conversations who they might want to talk to in their state about how to sustain some of this work and how to really use these federal dollars to help do that. So, but as a reminder, this webinar is not providing any guidance. It sounds like there is guidance out there now. That is wonderful. So we'll look forward to reading that. So I am pleased to be able to introduce Elizabeth Gaines, who's going to share a little bit about the analysis that's been done by the Children's Funding Project. Thanks for joining us today, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Missy. And I'm on about page 55 of the 150 pages of guidance that came out this morning from Treasury on the state and local fiscal recovery dollars. So we all have lots of fun reading to do this week. So really thrilled to be here with you all, and you can hop to the next slide. I am the executive director of a relatively new organization called Children's Funding Project, and we exist really specifically to help states and communities to think about how they can more equitably distribute resources and have a strategic financing plan for how they approach funding children's services really from cradle to career. And so I'm going to show you some of the things that we've been doing since COVID began. And, you know, my own little disclaimer, and you can go to the next slide, is that we are truly laser focused on state and local financing. And so when COVID began over a year ago, our team sat down and did that. You know, everybody was using the word pivot, but we too had to think about how we were going to pivot to really pay good, solid attention to the resources that were starting to come out of the federal government in this time of crisis that we're in. So we sat down, we started combing through all of the different departments and agencies and new rules that were being made and new flexibilities that were being given. And we wrote the first round of this cradle to career guide to federal relief funding. Just this last month, we of course felt like we needed to revisit the guide. And so we've just released our second version of this that really dives into the December money and dives into the American Rescue Plan in pretty great detail and provides lots of sort of connections to examples from states and communities that used the CARES Act dollars and various other stimulus packages creatively. So if you go to the next page, and we'll make sure that everybody has a link to this guide, I think it's at the end. So I wanted to just give you a bird's eye view for a second. Now, reminder, this is cradle to career we're talking about, and I'm going to zoom in on the big buckets that relate to early childhood in a minute, but wanted you to just have a sense of, you know, we're talking essentially across these different packages that happened over the last year, we're talking about $5 trillion in investment in our country. Of that, approximately 850 billion is focused on children and youth. So when you think about that, it's about 16% of the total amount, and that's better than kids do in the general budget in a given federal year. So I think that, you know, really both administrations thought about, you know, the import of focusing on stability for our kids in this time. And so that's pretty exciting to me as a lifelong, you know, advocate for children and youth. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see the various packages that passed over the course of the last year, with the American Rescue Plan being on the end here. But you can see just how many different areas and funding streams really got a significant boost over the course of time. So we're talking about not just education funding and early childhood funding, but also child welfare and behavioral health and nutrition. Now, the things that I think are going to relate really specifically to early childhood, I'll dive into a little bit more in depth, and that's the childcare funding, and then also the state and local fiscal recovery, which on the next slide, I think you'll see. No, it's not on the next slide, but I will just say I will dive into the state and local fiscal recovery briefly as well. So this is the childcare money that has passed in the three big acts: CARES, SRSA, and American Rescue Plan. And you can see, you know, used childcare and development block grant as the sort of vehicle to get resources out pretty quickly in those first two plans, with some additional resources going to Head Start. this last round American Rescue Plan has that $24 billion that goes to this thing called a Child Care Stabilization Fund. Well, you know, when you look at that across all of these different packages, we're talking about approximately $81 billion being infused into our systems. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, that one, you will see sort of the kinds of things when we're talking about Child Care Development Fund, and then the kinds of things that are sort of possible in this new area called Child Care Stabilization. So that $24 billion can go to some things that we maybe wouldn't necessarily instinctually think were going to be part of it. So, you know, the thing that catches my eye is the mental health supports for children and employees. So things like that I think are pretty important. If you hop to the next slide, one of the things that we're trying to do, and we've been talking with folks at Center for American Progress, I asked them if I could use this slide that they've been sort of grappling with, is okay, so when we think about the flow of essentially these $40 billion for childcare relief funding, you know, definitely a significant amount of it going through Child Care Development Block Grant, but even that has a lot of flexibility that we haven't necessarily seen in the past. And then this $24 billion, there's a lot, I think, that you as PDG folks and other folks in your states can really do to get creative about how you get these resources out into communities. One thing that I think we're going to have to start thinking about is how we utilize intermediaries in communities, because if we really want to see, you know, truly equitable distribution of these funds and use of these, it might be really helpful to look to some of those established intermediary organizations, both at the state and the local level, that can help. So those, you know, childcare resource and referrals, shared services networks. I am a big fan of folks who've already had to go to their voters and have created a local public dedicated funding stream, and they already know and are equipped to manage grants in their communities and do that kind of work. The CDFIs, there's a range of folks that we could be thinking creatively about. So if you go to the next slide, one thing I wanted to do is just make sure we are always putting the childcare dollars in context. So if we think about that 2018 National Academies of Science report that said we really should be spending about $140 billion annually in this country to fully fund our early childhood system. And prior to COVID, we were spending about $29 billion. That left us with a pretty big gap. And yes, we did just see, as I said, about $81 billion in federal relief. One thing to think about with those dollars is they were meant to respond to a very dramatic crisis that was happening. So it's not sort of a equal comparison. Also, those dollars are meant to be spread out over a few years' time. So I think, you know, we still have a long way to go. I know that there's a lot of attention on childcare right now. And so I just always am wanting to make sure we understand the full cost of what we're talking about, and then how far we just took a leap, and then what's left to get to. So we can hop to the next slide. And this one just gives you a sense of those timelines. So, you know, you see the first CARES Act dollars, and then you see the American Rescue Plan dollars passing. September 30, 2022 is a date to pay attention to, because that's when the obligation deadline for CARES and that December money, and then the ARP stabilization fund dollars, that $24 billion needs to be obligated. And then the obligation deadline for American Rescue Plan Child Care Development Block Grant is the next September. And then I believe we have about 12 months beyond that we can actually spend down those dollars. Truth in Advertising, my colleague Kylie Wheeler wrote this guide, and also is the most steeped in the very, very details. So I want to make sure that last bullet is accurate, and I will get back with you on that. But if you go to the next slide, just some things that are worth considering. So I want to make sure that, you know, we're tapping into and coordinating and collaborating with as many of the folks that care about the creation of a really equitable system as we can, because we've been in a mode of scarcity for a very long time in this field. And so I think that, you know, what that does is sort of forces folks to go off into their silos. And we're in a moment where we absolutely need to have people coming together to meet the need and the demand for what we're talking about here. And so it's really going to take some changes in our mindset and thinking about what we do in a moment of abundance for children. So really working across all of these different groups to get this work done. If we hop to the next slide, I do want to make sure to touch on the state and local fiscal recovery dollars. So this is an entirely different pot of money. You will have heard about it, that, you know, states, legislatures and local elected bodies are grappling with how to spend the very flexible dollars that are coming down to them to support them in the event that they have had, you know, budget shortfalls. Well, you can see the sheer, you know, numbers we're talking about here. And then if you go to the next slide, this is the piece that I'm deeply steeped in. My eyes are crossing a little bit because I've been reading the 150-page guidance that came out from Treasury today. And so far, so good. The things on the left-hand side are how they've said to states and communities they can use their relief dollars. On the right-hand side, we at Children's Funding Project really tried to tease out, well, what does that mean for those of us in the child serving fields? How could we sort of make a solid case to state government and to local government that setting aside a portion of their resources for children is a valid and worthwhile investment coming out of those relief dollars. So we saw a lot of really good examples in the guide that we'll share. You will see that there's a lot in there that states and communities have done to really say, yeah, we'd like to set some of this money aside for kids. So we can go to the next slide. And I do want to reference, Paula, your comment. Yes, this is not the official federal guidance. This is Children's Funding Project, giving our sort of take on what has happened in these various packages and some of the things that as a field we should be just thinking about. So it's become very clear to us that state and local capacity is something that we all need to be focusing on so that we can make sure to coordinate the resources for more equitable outcomes and use. We need to be thinking about how to ramp back up our administering infrastructure and our data systems and the ability to track the resources. We really should be thinking about how to put all of this together in a strategic financing plan so that when you saw that timeline, you know, when the clock starts to wind down, we know how we're going to make a plan for the future. And then, you know, really setting some precedent for shared investment, federal, state, and local in our early childhood systems across the country. And then this last piece on documenting everything and telling the story is going to be incredibly important because like with ARA, you know, we saw that there wasn't always a great capture of exactly what the impact had been. And so we really just want to make sure that at the state and local level, folks are documenting what they're doing and getting the good word out about all of the amazing progress that I know everybody's going to make. So that is all from me.
All right, I will hop in. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm Neil Horn from PDG B-5 TA Center. And when my oldest daughter was young, we took her to a Taylor Swift concert. And I feel like whoever went on before Taylor Swift, that's what's just happening right now. All of a sudden, I'm going on after Taylor. It doesn't work so well. So I'll do my best. But I'll let me just sort of start with. We've been here before. We've been here with the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, with Race to the Top, early learning. And so I think that part of what we want to do as a center, aside from I'll have no numbers and even less guidance, no guidance, is to really talk about this as an opportunity. And what's interesting is to start to think about, it made me think about two people that I've worked with over the years. Bruce Cameron, who's done a lot of systems work for older children in Milwaukee, wraparound Milwaukee. One of the smartest things he ever said to me was, money makes you stupid. And I was like, first of all, I got it without the money. I was able to achieve that. But more importantly, his point is that sometimes you get this influx and you're like, woo, and you end up on Dream Lottery Home on HGTV has been the thing that I've been saying to folks. And so if we think about this as a great opportunity, we can do the other thing that Les Abel, who was doing some systems work in Ohio years back, said, which is, you don't want to build a rock so big you can't move it. So with this kind of money, part of this is to be really thinking about, here's a great opportunity. What's the planning? What is it that we're going to do that's going to help us move our system forward without it being moved to a place that we can't really sustain or sort of deal with? And so I think it's really important to start with, what are the existing goals and priorities in your state? And that to me may seem like a no-brainer. I'd be interested to know if everybody, that's exactly what you did. You're like, okay, here's a great opportunity. Let's sit down. Let's look at exactly what we have already said we're trying to do, and then decide how to keep moving that forward, versus how many are like, oh my God, look at what we can do now. What we've learned over the years, particularly with this short term, and it was great to have Elizabeth lay out those dates, as you sort of see there, it's very clear when all that's obligated and done. And so when you start with, we've already done all this planning. I mean, I've seen lots of your plans, and they've obviously, you've thought about a lot of the opportunities that might come, and here's one. So it's really this great chance in some ways to think about, is there something that we've been waiting to try and do to innovate a little bit from what we've been doing, or something we've learned from one of our other partners here in our PDG work, and to really start to innovate? And part of that might be these partnerships. As you know, all of you have been around, maybe not as long as me. Maybe you didn't buy Candio when it was first released by the Cars, but maybe some of you have. This is the place where now everybody is going to be your partner. Oh, yeah, of course we want to be partners with you. But it is this great opportunity to really think about strategically, how will this move us forward? And then how does this help us use what we already have? Obviously, PDG 5 is one of the best. And so I think that that's a really important way to start to look at these things, is it's an opportunity to build on what we already have. And on the next slide, I can sort of give you some examples. So full disclosure, Lori Connors-Tedros was unable to make it today. So it's literally like that movie Multiplicity, when Michael Keaton makes a clone of a clone of a clone. This is what you end up with, is like 3 steps away from Lori. So I'll do my best. I'll give you, Kate, I'll give you as many references. I stopped paying attention in the 90s, so I don't have many references that will help most of the people. But as long as Kate's happy, I think I'm good. But I really want folks to start to think about these conversations you're having and are going to have about how you sustain your PDG B-5 work. One is to start with these investments on those goals that I just talked about, the goals he already had. So for example, Lori was going to talk about how in Michigan, they're going back to their 2020 top 10 strategic plan. And they're going to start to think about which one of these is the great opportunity. So I think that some of this is about, what have you all created? I can't imagine that everyone's sitting there with a blank piece of paper on a legal pad saying, what should we do? You're all thinking about, now we can do this. So one of it is to think about, what were the goals that you had 6 months ago, 12 months ago, and really think about, how does this align with that and the investments that we want to make? Really good opportunity to do that. The other piece, most of you have probably done some sort of a needs assessment along the way in some way, shape, or form, if not 10 of them would be my guess. So this is really a chance for y'all to sort of engage your partners, stakeholders, and start to think about, well, what do we need? What would be most helpful to fill in some of those gaps we never could figure out before? So, in Indiana, they're really looking at 4 of their priority areas, right? There's a good chance to start to say, this is where we need to start to put our focus a bit here, and to really think about, we already have talked about this, we just couldn't figure out a mechanism. And now I can sort of engage stakeholders. I mean, I don't engage anybody. I just sit and talk about what other people do in other states, but you get the point. And then lastly is to start to think about what's out there in terms of high quality teaching and learning. So in Pennsylvania, for example, those LEAs there are only allowed to sort of choose from the Evidence Resource Center, right? So where can we look to if we're going to do something? Where are the places where it sort of says, this is an evidence-based practice, this has research behind it, this is where the data is all going to support our efforts moving forward? Again, so we're not building that rocks that's too big to move it, but that we're actually building the system that we envisioned, whether we had this particular set of funds or not. And so I just think that over the years, particularly with these big investments, it's a great opportunity, and it's really a great opportunity to keep going down a path that you've been going down, but now with some funds behind it. So I hope, I haven't given any guidance, and I hope that that sort of helps set us up for some of the panel that we're going to hear from next, and then in our conversations in our breakout. So I'm going to turn it back to Missy.
Thanks, Neil, and thanks, Elizabeth, for setting us up with this conversation. I'm really pleased to be able to join three of us are going to be talking from different states, Maine, Louisiana, and Wisconsin. So I'd like to introduce our panelists for the day who are going to share a little bit about their current state experience. So I'm joined today by Taylor Dunn. So thanks for being here, Taylor. Erin Marango-Escalante as well. And then Anna Hicks. I want to make sure that everyone is pinned to the screen before we get started. All right. Thank you all for being here and taking time to share a little bit what your state has been doing as you prepare for these, to really use some of these resources to potentially support your mixed delivery system. So we are going to hear from each of these panelists regarding 3 questions, and then we're going to have some breakout conversations today. So I'm going to make sure that we can hear. Anna, can we do a quick audio check with you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Anna.
All right, great.
All right, so our panels have kind of identified some core areas that they think that they can contribute to some of the thinking that you all are doing as states. And so we're going to start today by talking about by asking the question, how have you leveraged your needs assessment, your comprehensive strategic plans, and other relevant plans? And this could be your CCDF plans, or as Neil mentioned, there's probably lots of other plans we know exist in the states, with appropriate funding, a funded partner. So how are you really working with other people in your state to think about this, whether it be your CCDF administrators, Department of Education, your advisory groups, to identify ways to use these new funds? So how is this process looking? Who are you talking to? And I think Erin's going to get us started on this one.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so feel free to cut me off if I start rambling. But Wisconsin was in that second cohort of preschool development grants. So we had our planning grant in 2020, and now we are in the first year of our renewal grant. And so I have to be honest, it was a blessing in disguise that we received our planning grant in 2020. During this time, obviously, the pandemic had started, and there was a lot going on. And so a couple of things occurred. One, we were doing our data collection for our needs assessment. We had to turn from having in-person listening sessions to doing so online, and really change our strategy to gaining knowledge and information from across our birth to 5 mixed delivery system. And I have to say, I feel like, again, blessing in disguise, we had new people coming to the table that historically were not there. We had new voices, new perspectives. And it was really interesting in how it played out in the development of our strategic plan. What I will say is that our strategic plan, the framework of it, which isn't going to sound unfamiliar at all, is really focused on access, affordability, quality, and workforce in order to advance and promote equity and inclusion in our state. And what has happened is that that particular framework and strategic plan has now become the same framework and strategic plan across numerous grants, initiatives, programs. It's it's the it. And in fact, it is also the framework that we look at and the plan that we look at for all of our funding. And so it's, and I'll even add a couple more layers here. It is also the framework that we used throughout writing our revised CCDF plan. It's woven in everything that we do. That is the direction that we are rowing in. So it has been the most incredible foundational document, living document, that connects all the pieces and gives us the direction that we want to go. So now when we layer our strategic plan into the immediate relief funding and our long-term investment, you can look and it's like putting together puzzle pieces with funding for the different buckets and our plan. We start to put together our puzzle, and we're moving the needle in each of those areas: access, affordability, quality, and workforce. And you can actually, we're getting to measure and to look at it and to evaluate. And it has been, we've done it with CARES Act, with our coronavirus relief funds that were earmarked specifically for childcare. We've done it with our SURSA funding, but we're rowing in the direction that is exciting. I will also say we have developed our Leadership Council on Early Years, which is led by our governor and first lady and all of our cabinet secretaries, state superintendent. This is the plan that they use as well. So this is not only a Department of Children and Families or a Department of Public Instruction initiative. This is across our state, led by the governor. And that's really key. So corrections, tourism, workforce development, health services, housing, you name it, they are at the table rowing in this direction and really focusing on how to intentionally connect the dots so that we can really improve access to high quality early care and education programs for children and families in our state.
Thanks, Erin, getting us started too. So I'm gonna pass it over to Anna and Taylor to see if there's anything in addition to the way you are using it in your state.
Sure, thank you, Missy, and thank you for your remarks, Erin. I would echo a lot of what Erin shared. I think when the preschool development grant opportunity presented itself to our state and we embarked in our application, and then subsequently the development of our strategic plan once we were awarded the planning grant, I think that plan became the sort of guiding light for all of our work across the early childhood spectrum in our state. So, that has carried forward, and the big bets, for lack of a better term, that are present in that plan, very, very similar to Erin. We've organized ours around quality, access, and then local governance, this idea of really investing in local communities to drive faster rates of improvement in both quality and access. And the big bets contained in each of those sort of buckets in our strategic plan, we've really been able to run with and expand or sustain using stimulus funding. And I think if we didn't have this PDG strategic plan in place already with buy-in from stakeholders and alignment with other organizations and agencies, we wouldn't have been so well positioned to move quickly with stimulus funding.
And I'll just add quickly, in Maine, I was lucky to come on as the Children's Cabinet Coordinator after our needs assessment had been mostly done through our PDG planning grant. So I came on in the fall of 2019. And the Children's Cabinet was reinstated by our governor, and one of our goals, so it's led by commissioners of Health and Human Services, Labor, Public Safety, Corrections, and Education. And we have an overarching goal of ensuring that all Maine children enter kindergarten prepared to succeed. So we were able to pull from the needs assessment. Okay, sweetie, I'm in the middle of the presentation. I will come get the bunny in a minute. Sweetie,
no, where is those stopping?
Okay, I'm going to pass this back to you, Missy, and then I will answer some of this in the second question.
No problem. And thank you. I think what we're highlighting here in general is wonderful because it shows that there's both the leadership, right, and the role that the governors might be playing, as well as the stakeholder engagement and the buy-in that you've built over the years, right? So I think as you think about how you're leveraging it, it sounds like you all have had some really great strategies about this isn't just something you're doing because there's new federal, but it sounds like new federal dollars, but you've been able to leverage the opportunities and the buy-in you've been building to really build out this mixed delivery system to think about how to use these dollars. So Anna, anything else you'd want to add to that before we move to the next question?
I'll just say really quickly, one thing that we've done with the Children's Cabinet Plan is to take our strategic plan and focus it a little bit more, which has been really helpful to think about this round of funding. We did not get our PDG renewal, so we are taking that grant and thinking about the next round of funding that we'll be getting at the federal level through the American Rescue Plan. But as somebody mentioned at the very beginning, kind of getting more focused. Our strategic plan is huge. And so the Children's Cabinet and the commissioners really taking that time to take the strategic plan and think about within that where there's some key priorities. And I'll just say we have some similar buckets of access, quality, and workforce are our 3 buckets.
Great. That's really helpful. And so maybe Anna, we'll continue on with Maine. If you can share about, specifically, it sounds like you guys have kind of taken the strategic plan, made some kind of sub-plans, more detailed plans from that, which is great. Are there some potential activities, I think we've talked about some of that being the data system example, that could use the additional dollars or kind of pilots to implement one-time dollars? How have you guys been considering that work?
Yeah, we're really excited about this opportunity of some, even though it's one-time funding, of really trying to build up some initiatives that we've been thinking about and kind of planning for a long time. And one of those is really our early childhood integrated data system. We do not have an ECIDS in Maine. And a group of us have actually been getting support from the PDG B-5 TA Center to start to build out that plan. And we are thinking that we will use some of our funding in a way that has been written about by this team around how to kind of get things off the ground and looking at really hiring for a short time period with some of the American Rescue Plan funding, if allowed, a project lead, a full-time project lead to really bring this work together and to look at over the next several years, doing some work in answering policy questions, doing that data matching, doing that work to really build towards an early childhood integrated data system and getting us on the road of really putting together a data governance plan and having that support to have somebody really driving that, along with thinking about having some part-time a person who can do that technology work to really link it also to our longitudinal data system that's being built right now. So we're excited about that. And then I'll just mention a couple other pieces that the governor announced last week as part of the state and local funding that we'll be getting. We're looking at putting some funding towards childcare infrastructure grants to expand childcare in Maine, both helping existing programs to expand through grants and then also expanding new programming. And in addition, so that's $10 million for that bucket, and then $10 million also for our public pre-K infrastructure and ensuring that we are providing grants to schools and communities to build out public pre-K. And the hope is that these grants will actually work in tandem so that we're thinking about our whole birth through 5 system and encouraging those partnerships between schools and community programs like childcare and Head Start. So those are just 2 examples of 2 projects we have on hand that we plan to be moving forward with once we get the guidance and get clearance on those projects.
Great, thanks, Anna. Erin, is there anything you'd contribute to that?
So we're in the exact same boat as Maine, really looking at our ECIDS, so the data, including our Head Start data, our 3-year-old and 4-year-old kindergarten data. So that's very similar. The other piece that we are looking at is really around technology. For the governor, he mentioned this is the year of broadband, and a lot of our programs and providers across our state do not have access to whether it's devices, hotspots, Wi-Fi. And so that is another piece that we are looking to support our programs and providers in. We are looking at rapidly expanding our shared services networks to ensure that they have access to those services and supports. But the big one for us, just real quickly, is focusing on our public-private partnerships and having the funding there as a carrot to allow for businesses then to match and then eventually take over those partnerships with our early care and education programs in our state. So that one-time funding could definitely definitely be used for lots of different reasons and opportunities.
Thanks, Erin. And Taylor, have you guys thought much about the potential activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 3 big focus areas in our preschool development grant renewal implementation. The first is piloting a new model of seat delivery, birth through 3-year-old childcare seat delivery in Louisiana that we're using preschool development grant to fund. And last year we were able to fund 660 roughly seats allocated to community networks and placed in high quality childcare centers with sort of a contracting model at the community level. With stimulus funding, with the SRSA stimulus, we've been able to expand that in this coming year to nearly 3,000. So we hope to use the stimulus as an opportunity to continue to expand the number of seats we're able to allocate in this new model, and then also sustain for longer than the terms of the preschool development grant, while advocates in our state continue to advocate for dedicated state funding to sustain them in the long term. We're also using preschool development grant funding to support Ready Start networks in our state, which are community level networks that are going beyond just coordinating services and enrollment and really thinking about revenue generation at the local level and the administration of funding, really high levels of fiscal management with accountability and public meetings and a coalition of stakeholders that help make decisions around funding at the local level. And then last, we're focusing on family childcare through our preschool development grant and funding a pilot for a staffed family childcare network model. And all of that we expect to expand on and hopefully sustain for longer using stimulus funding.
That's great. And so I'm hearing a theme here around infrastructure, right? These activities that you were all trying to do is really maintain the infrastructure that you've built to support your MDS. And those are the kinds of activities that you are focusing on right now. So that's great. So as we move into the last question here, what strategies has your state used to determine ways to use the funding to sustain the current activities? So this is more of like a process question. Who have you talked to? What does that look like? What recommendations might you have for other states in this area? And I think, Taylor, we'll just continue on with you if you don't mind.
Sure. So you're exactly right, Missy. We have focused very much so on first, how can we use this funding to build infrastructure that doesn't currently exist or create capacity in communities so that they can build infrastructure and continue to do the work of raising revenue for seats, creating new childcare supply, et cetera, beyond the terms of the stimulus. And a couple examples of how we're doing that. One, we're working with First Children's Finance to pilot a revolving loan fund and hoping to expand that even further with philanthropic dollars to really focus on facilities. So that's an example of infrastructure that we hope to invest in now that will outlive the terms of the stimulus. We're also investing in communities' ability, as I mentioned, to generate revenue and think about sustainability at the local level. So we're offering some grant opportunities around childcare supply building and access expansion so that the communities themselves can add capacity to their own teams to be thinking about this work in the short term. And then I would say from a process perspective, we are also working extremely closely right now with stakeholders. So we're doing some pretty extensive listening sessions right now around ARPA funding and how we want to design our ARPA spending plan. And I think through that stakeholder engagement and collecting pretty robust feedback from childcare providers, from families, from our community networks, from advocates, et cetera, we're getting to a point where we have a vision of, what is the system that we really want to design now with ARPA funds? And then hoping to position advocates and stakeholders to continue to push our state and local leadership to invest in early childhood, more broadly speaking, so that this, the system that we're able to enhance and expand and build with stimulus funding can be sustained in the long run. And I will say, this hasn't, I don't think it's come up, but the thing that we are overwhelmingly hearing from these listening sessions is that childcare teacher compensation is the thing that is sort of on everyone's mind right now, that it is a health and safety imperative, it is a mental well-being imperative, mental health imperative, it is a quality of interactions imperative, it's an access imperative, it's a childcare supply imperative. And so it feels really urgent that we be thinking about how to get this right with stimulus funding, and then how to ensure that we're able to sustain whatever solution we put in place.
That's great. Thanks, Taylor. Anna, anything you'd add?
Yeah, along with kind of what Taylor talked about around talking to stakeholders, and I think using the needs assessment where we really engaged a ton of stakeholders across the state, including parents, childcare teachers, and others. We're ensuring that the needs assessment is really feeding into our work, but also evaluation is going to be a key part of all of our work. Just by example, the legislature passed a bill to establish 5 pilot sites for our early childhood mental health consultation program. So we started getting that up and running. It started in January in 5 counties. We were able to use some CURSA funds to expand that to 3 more pilot sites. And then our plan is hopefully to use American Rescue Plan funding to evaluate that. So we would then ensure that we are showing the power of this programming so that we can make the case to policymakers and our commissioners on our children's cabinet that this should continue to be a priority to fund and expand our early childhood mental health consultation program statewide. This was a huge issue in our needs assessment, and we hear over and over again, along with workforce and workforce compensation, we hear of the challenges that childcare teachers and early childhood educators are finding around behavioral health issues. So making sure that we're choosing priorities that we know issues that are funding priorities with this one-time funding, and then evaluating those programs to really show the power of those programs to our policymakers. And of course, starting out with the buy-in of our Children's Cabinet Commissioners and leadership is key as well. So that's just one example of something that we're funding. Another issue that came up a lot was families really struggling with how to navigate our early childhood system, both on the education and care side, and also a healthcare side. So we're looking at potentially putting in place a Help Me Grow model, again, evaluating that model and building support for the model with key policymakers across the state leaders, and the governor will be part of our strategy.
Thanks, Anna. So we'll wrap up where we started with you, Erin.
Sounds good. So I mentioned earlier our Leadership Council on Early Years that's at the state level and really focusing on connecting the dots, but also doing so at the local level. And that's really, really key. And again, building the table where people are building the table with those with lived experience, in really going to the communities versus and developing those relationships with key community stakeholders has been so incredibly helpful. There was a point where, there were assumptions being made early on about what we felt like people needed, and the buy-in wasn't there. The assumptions may have been off. So going and listening, actively listening and being engaged has been, just really key. The other piece is really leveraging our advocates. We have incredible advocates, and they too are right alongside with us with our strategic plan. So we're all in unison. The message that they're hearing, that our legislature is hearing, is consistent. And in fact, in our governor's proposed budget, you can literally see the connection between our strategic plan and what's literally identified in the budget, as well as our governor's Early Childhood Advisory Council recommendations. It all lines up. It's consistent. It's strong. It's unified. And I really do think we are going to move the needle, particularly with this additional funding.
That's great. Well, thank you all for sharing your state perspective. I think that's really helpful to get others who are interested in doing this or currently in the process of doing this. This is a just really great time to share some of the lessons learned and what you all have been focusing on. So thank you so much for joining today. We're now going to offer an opportunity for everyone on the webinar to join in this conversation. And so what we're going to do is break everyone into groups. And so if you are in a region, you're going to be put with your TA specialist. And so you may or may not know who they are, given we're kind of opening this webinar to many people. So these will be the folks who are kind of facilitating the next breakout call. We're going to ask a series of questions, and we're going to note that if you are not a state representative, you are more than welcome to join and listen in, but we encourage you to be in listening mode. Please allow this time for the states to engage and interact with each other as they are really trying to figure out how they want to approach the conversations across the state and where they are, where they're getting stuck with each other. And this is really an opportunity. We know there's some other folks who are TA providers in the call. Again, please feel free to listen, but this is not going to be the time for us to engage yet. So the questions we're going to be encouraging the teams to kind of talk about in the breakout rooms are: how have you used your strategic plans to inform your new ideas? What are the activities that you've been supporting under PDG B-5 that you think could continue on with these potential funds? And what strategies are you using to kind of think about how you sustain PDG with these dollars? So that's where we're going to move. We're about to break out, and so you're going to see a room kind of come up on your screen that's going to take. So I hope that was an informative breakout where you got to talk a little bit about what your state is doing in the regions and to hear from your colleagues. So we're hopefully that was a good use of time. In the few minutes that we have left, we'd love to hear a couple ideas that you were all able to share, and if there was anything in particular that stood out that you think we should hear as a large group. So I will start by, again, we don't have to hear from every group, but just a couple of really important ideas that you think would be helpful for other states to hear from today would be great. So are there others that had additional ideas that we didn't hear from us, maybe the panel, but you thought were really important that you wanted to highlight from your group about how you've used the strategic plans to inform your ideas for new funds?
Hi, this is Deborah Anderson, and I'm with Region 4, and we had Florida and North Carolina and Tennessee and Mississippi that were part of our room today. And I think our states are still in the process of implementing some planning, but one of our participants reminded us that in the process of developing the needs assessments and strategic plans for PDG, they were very actively engaging parents and community partners. And that's I think that's something for us to remind when we're swiftly putting these plans together, is that the plans developed through PDG had a lot of community input. And I think that helps us inform making our future plans.
That's a great reminder. Thanks, Deborah and team. So what were some specific activities from PDG B-5 that you all discussed potentially wanting to consider to support and sustain some of the work that you've all been doing? Were there specific activities that your teams identified considering?
This is Howard for Regions 9 and 10. We heard multiple conversations around data systems and responsive data systems to the needs of the Birth to 5 mixed delivery system. So that was a really common theme across multiple states. Really looking at social emotional work, and then also family home providers and expanding and bringing on new providers and family friend and neighbor networks. So those were some key things that our group focused on or we're looking at the use of funds.
Great, thanks, Howard. And then were there any specific or different strategies for using your state to leverage just one-time dollars to sustain any of the work that you're currently doing? Any strategies, any process pieces, any people that you think in particular folks should be talking to?
We talked a little bit about how some of us are using the one-time funds to strengthen our data systems and to connect different big pieces of our system together it's a big heavy lift, and then it'll stay and be there after the one-time funds. So that's proven already to be a good success with the PDG Birth 5 money.
Great. Yeah, the big infrastructure pieces that can be expensive but easier to sustain. Yeah, that's great. All right. And does anybody have any outstanding questions that this webinar brought up for you today that we want to make sure? And I think Richard has posted the, Richard, do you want to, was that the link to the guidance itself, Richard?
Sent the link to the OCC guidance as well as a brief White House briefing link that's related to that. And then also a recent RAND study that's not related to that, but has to do with universal pre-K and just the whole mixed delivery system that folks might be interested in.
Awesome. And we will make sure we post all of those additional resources. We'll add them to this resources slide that will go out and get posted to the website.
Missy, could I make one clarification because it came up in our breakout, and that was that I was referencing reading the 150-page guidance from Treasury, and I just wanted to be clear that what Richard is sharing is the more specific piece on childcare. The piece that I was referencing was related to the state and local fiscal recovery dollars and the guidance that just came out today from Treasury. So I can put that link in here too if that's helpful.
Great.
Or if that's confusing, I won't.
No, I think it's good. We'll clarify that in the resources. They're different. So okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. That will help. It looks like I see some states nodding, so I think they would like to see that. So awesome. So thank you all. And I want to say a special thank you to all of our presenters today for taking the time to be part of this discussion and sharing both their experience and their expertise. It's been great. We hope that you learned a lot from your other peers in your breakouts, and we're excited to continue this conversation. If you have questions about ideas or how to sustain, please do reach out. We'll be looking at that guidance alongside our partners, and look forward to seeing the OCC webinar that Paula and her team will, I assume, will be hosting. So Paula, do you want to do any update on that just so they know it's coming?
You know, the timing is wonderful because we got the notice that the guidance had been posted 15 minutes before this webinar began. And the Office of Child Care is planning to have at least 2 webinars this week to go into more detail about what's in that guidance. And if you get the OCC announcements from the Office of Child Care, you'll be getting information about that. And if you're not on that mailing list, we could make sure. Missy, does someone on the team have that link handy? You can find it on the Office of Child Care website if you don't get those announcements already.
Yeah, and we'll see if someone from the team can throw it in there really quickly. If not, we'll include that in the resources. But yeah, go to the OCC page. There's a place there to join for the listservs. So if you're not already on that list, highly recommend it because that's where the information will be coming out this week. So with that, I want to thank you. If you have any questions, please do reach out to your TA specialist or your colleagues that you met today. We're here to be a thought partner and come alongside. And so we're just really excited and appreciate the opportunity you all took to spend some time with us today. Thank you so much. And thank you again to our presenters. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye.